The look of sheer terror on my boss Derek's face when he realized what he'd done was absolutely priceless. There he stood in my cubicle at 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, staring at his phone like it had just exploded in his hands. 3 minutes earlier, he'd accidentally sent me a text meant for his mistress, and now he was about to learn why messing with the wrong employee can ruin your entire life. My name is Tyler Brooks. I'm 26 years old, and until that fateful Tuesday morning, I was just another underpaid graphic designer at Morrison Creative Agency. Derek Morrison, the agency owner's son, was everything I despised about nepotism. Arrogant, incompetent, and completely convinced that his daddy's money made him untouchable. I leaned back in my chair, still staring at the text message that would change everything. "Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. Tell your husband you're working late again, room 237 at the Marriott like always." Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Sweet, sweet karma had finally arrived. Working for Derek Morrison was like being trapped in a daily episode of How Not to Manage People. At 34, Derek had inherited his position as creative director when his father promoted him over 3 more qualified candidates, including me. I'd been with the agency for 2 years, consistently producing award-winning work, while Derek took credit and collected bonuses. "Brooks, I need you to redo the Henderson campaign," Derek announced that Monday, dropping layouts on my desk with his usual condescending smirk. The client didn't like the direction. I looked at the work ad designs I'd spent 3 weeks perfecting based on his specific feedback. What didn't they like about it? "Everything," he said dismissively. "It's not creative enough. Too safe." "But you specifically asked for a conservative approach. You said innovative was too risky." Derek's eyes narrowed. "Are you questioning my judgment, Brooks? Because there are plenty of graphic designers who'd love to have your job." It was his favorite threat, delivered with the confidence of someone who'd never had to earn anything. I'd watched him destroy 3 talented designers before me through impossible demands and constant criticism. The affair had been obvious for months to anyone paying attention. Derek would disappear for client meetings that weren't on his calendar, return from lunch smelling like expensive perfume, and take mysterious phone calls that required stepping outside the office. His wife Sandra was actually lovely, a kind woman who brought homemade cookies to the office and always remembered everyone's birthdays. She'd married Derek in college before his father's business took off and genuinely seemed to believe she'd found a decent man. Watching her smile while her husband plotted hotel rendezvous made my stomach turn. I was reviewing proofs for the Henderson campaign when my phone buzzed. The sender showed Derek M., and my first thought was annoyance that he was texting work instructions instead of walking 10 feet to my desk. Then I read the message and nearly choked on my coffee. The realization hit Derek's face in stages as he approached my cubicle. First confusion when he noticed my expression, then dawning horror as his eyes moved to my phone screen. Finally, pure panic as he understood exactly what had happened. "Brooks," he said, his voice strangled, "I need to... That message. There's been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I asked, enjoying his discomfort. "About a client meeting at the Marriott in room 237 with someone who has a husband." Derek went completely white. "You don't understand the context." "The context seems pretty clear, though I'm curious about one thing." "What? Does Sandra know you're working late tonight?" The next few minutes were the most entertaining I'd experienced in 2 years of employment. Derek cycled through every stage of damage control, denial, bargaining, threats, and finally desperate pleading. "Look, Brooks, you're a smart guy," he said, glancing around nervously. "These things happen. People have complicated personal lives. it doesn't affect our work relationship. Doesn't it? I mean, this is pretty distracting. Hard to focus on graphic design when you're thinking about other things. Derek's jaw tightened. What do you want? There it was. 2 years of stolen credit, impossible deadlines, public humiliation, and condescending comments had led to this moment. Derek Morrison, the untouchable boss, was finally vulnerable. I want a lot of things, I said slowly. Fair compensation for my work, credit for my designs, maybe not having to redo projects 4 times because you can't make up your mind. Done, Derek said immediately. Consider yourself promoted. Senior designer, 20% raise. Your name on the Henderson campaign. I pretended to consider this while internally celebrating. That's a start. But there's something else. What? I held up my phone. I think Sandra deserves to know what kind of man she married. Derek's desperation reached new heights. You can't. She doesn't. It would destroy her. You should have thought about that before cheating on her. Here's what's going to happen, I said, standing up from my desk. You're going to drive home and tell Sandra the truth, all of it. The affair, the lies, the fake conferences, everything. I can't do that. Or I can forward this text to her right now, along with some photos I took of you leaving the Marriott last Thursday with your brunette friend. Derek somehow managed to get even paler. You took photos? I was having lunch across the street. Funny coincidence, right? My phone has an excellent camera. This was actually true. I'd been eating at the deli across from the Marriott when I spotted Derek's car in the parking lot. Curiosity got the better of me, and I'd snapped a few pictures when I saw him walking out with a woman who definitely wasn't his wife. If I tell her you'll delete the photos, I'll keep quiet about the affair, I agreed, but I'm keeping the photos as insurance, and the promotion we discussed, that's happening regardless. Derek left the office looking like he was heading to his own execution. Around 3 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Done. It's over. She wants a divorce. I felt a mix of satisfaction and genuine sadness for Sandra. She deserved better than having her marriage implode because her husband couldn't keep his commitments, but she also deserved to know the truth. 20 minutes later, another text. She says she suspected for months. Thank you for giving her proof she needed. Derek returned to work Thursday looking like he'd aged 5 years in 2 days. The swagger was gone, replaced by the hollow expression of someone whose world had collapsed. Sandra's filing for divorce, he said without preamble. She's asking for half of everything, including my stake in the company. The promotion we discussed. Senior designer, 20% raise. It starts Monday. And my name on the Henderson campaign? Already updated the presentation. You'll be presenting to the client next week. For the first time in 2 years, Derek actually looked me in the eye when he spoke. I've been a terrible boss, and apparently a terrible husband. I can't fix my marriage, but I can try to do better here. The changes at Morrison Creative were gradual but noticeable. Derek stopped taking credit for other people's work. He actually listened during meetings instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. The divorce proceedings were messy and public, especially when Sandra's lawyer discovered the extent of Derek's affairs. Apparently, the brunette from accounting wasn't his first side piece, just the most recent. But Derek took it all without trying to shift blame or make excuses. When reporters asked about the allegations, he simply said, "My personal failures are no one's fault but my own." 6 months later, Derek knocked on my new office door and asked to come in. He looked healthier than he had in years. The stress lines around his eyes had faded, and he'd lost the desperate edge that used to define him. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "Thank me?" For destroying your marriage. For forcing me to be honest. Sandra and I, we should have divorced years ago. We were both miserable, just too scared to admit it. He pulled out an envelope and set it on my desk. Inside was a check for $10,000 and a letter of recommendation that was genuinely glowing. Derek, this is the least I can do. You saved me from becoming someone I couldn't live with. That's worth more than money. I eventually took a better job at Sterling Creative. Derek rebuilt Morrison Creative into a company that actually valued its employees. Sandra married her divorce lawyer 2 years later in what everyone agreed was the most joyful wedding they'd ever attended. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't require elaborate schemes or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it just requires the courage to hold people accountable for their actions, even when those people have power over you. The mistaken text message was just dumb luck. But what I did with that luck was a choice. And sometimes the right choice creates ripple effects that make everyone's life better, even the person who thought they were being punished.